Okay, hello everyone.
Hi.
Really happy that you all came to listen to us. We appreciate that a lot. My name is Daniel Goldberg, and
I'm Linus Larsson.
yeah, and we are the authors of this book. So we're both journalists, and we're based in Stockholm. And yeah, this is why we're here today, to talk to you a little bit about the book we've written. Has anyone read it? Just out of curiosity yet, except for the Swedish people who don't have all the time to do that. Okay, so it's being released. I think the official launch date is November 5th,
Yeah.
right? And I think Amazon started selling it a bit earlier, but technically the copies we've got with us here are the first ones, so we're really excited to hear what people say about it.
So Amazon cheated a bit, but no one in book publishing can tell them what to do. So
No, everyone's just really
Yeah.
happy that they carry stuff. So this book is non-fiction. As I said, we're both journalists, so we're interested in true stories and in describing stuff that has actually happened. And it tells the story of how Minecraft was created, and it tells the story of how Minecraft grew into this massive and really interesting phenomenon or subculture. It's based primarily on interviews with Notch and Jeb, other people working at Mojang, Jakob, Carl, Lydia, members from Notch's family, friends, bosses from previous jobs, and so on. So we spent a large part of last year talking to people to try to piece together what had happened when Minecraft was created and what the reasons were for it being created. It also eventually turned into a fairly personal story about Notch, like where his inspiration comes from and where he comes from and so on. And it was released in Sweden last year, almost a year ago now, I think. And as I said, the English translation is just coming out in the next few days.
it's also
And
being published
yeah.
in Japanese and Korean and Danish, if anyone would prefer that. But
Yeah,
they're not
so
out
there are
yet.
options.
Yes.
You know. So we'll be talking a bit about what we're trying to do, what we want to say with the book, and hopefully share some interesting anecdotes from our work with it. And please, please ask as many questions as you can as we go along. It's much more interesting than hearing us just hearing us talk if you help us. And I'm sure we might have some interesting stuff to offer as well. So please ask questions. We'd really appreciate that. Yeah, that's about it. Lead us.
So we started working on the book in the autumn of 2011, just about the time when the first MINECON took place in Las Vegas. We were there, and early on when we were working on the book, our idea about it had a lot to do with money. Because at the time, Notch was not exactly the superstar he is today. And we thought about the book a lot. We thought about the book like a book about a business phenomenon, almost. We tried to look at the usual stuff that you would look at if you were writing a business book like that. We would try to find a business plan that we could look at and talk to Markus and Notch and the others about marketing strategies and so on. And we have to admit that the reason we were so interested in the money was that at this time a lot of people were writing about Minecraft and about Notch in the simplest way possible, simply about someone who had made a lot of money very quickly. And that's part of the story, but it turned out it's not the whole story. Because the more we looked at it, the more obvious it was to us that that wouldn't really work. It wouldn't become a book. It wouldn't encapsulate like the Minecraft phenomenon just looking at it from a business perspective. Because there was nothing like a proper business plan in the beginning. There was no marketing strategy or anything like that to look at. But when we did ask, I remember when we asked Notch about his marketing strategy early on, and everything he could say that to explain why Minecraft grew so quickly back then was that he had realized that if he used a banner saying 50% off and using an orange background, that was extremely successful. Then he sold a lot more games, and that was about as sophisticated as it got from a marketing perspective with Minecraft. So we had to look for something else to explain how Minecraft could turn into what it is today. We needed to understand both who Markus was, how he thought, and where he found his inspiration, and we needed to meet the people from the community that didn't work for Mojang or work with the game itself, but still had a great part in creating it. So in the end, it turned out we had to approach Minecraft more like a cultural phenomenon than a business phenomenon. Also, we play a lot of video games ourselves, so when we got the chance to write a book about Notch as more of an artist and a creative person who created something, a cultural product rather than just a commercial product, it really appealed to us personally as well.
So basically the decision was made fairly early on that instead of looking at numbers, which turned out, there wasn't anything to look at, no one could explain, stuff just happened basically. We wanted to understand Minecraft as a culture, and we wanted to understand Markus as a game maker. Questions that we asked ourselves was, where did he get ideas from, what inspired him, and so on. And the book eventually turned out into what it is today, which is more personal, and largely that is thanks to everyone in this community and all the people we spoke to being so open and generous to us with their interviews. So it's really it's their work. Some of the people who helped us with interviews are here today, so it's without them it really wouldn't have happened.
And we were really lucky to come in at a fairly early point. So Minecraft was already a big deal in 2011, of course, but not nearly as popular as it is today. So that gave us the chance to get all the interviews that we felt we needed to really describe what had happened. And we got to follow their, how they sort of grew into stardom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, so
let's show a picture.
Yeah. We started out in 2011, as Lina said. Has anyone here been to Stockholm? Oh, really? All right, quite a few then. Have you been to this place? Okay, so this is an address on the street is called Åsagatan in southern Stockholm, and this is where Mojang had their office back then. Anyone seen the documentary about Minecraft? Yeah, so you probably recognize a few scenes from in here, from that as well. This is where we started out as well. This is where we did most of our interviews. Funnily enough, this has actually become quite a popular place for Minecraft gamers who visit Stockholm to travel to. I heard a lot of stories about Japanese tourists showing up with cameras here and sort of ringing the doorbell asking for autographs. And obviously Mojang has moved since then, so that if they do, they would probably get a bit disappointed. I'm not sure who has these offices now. So it's an old, fairly rundown building in the south of Stockholm. The impressions when you visited this place for the first time wasn't that of a $1 million company. There was a doorbell with a really small sign that said Mojang, and it didn't work. So even if you rang the doorbell, no one would answer. So in order to be let in, you had to call someone up in the office and ask them to come down and open the door for you.
Or bother a neighbor.
Yeah, bother a neighbor. We bothered the neighbors many times to be let into the building. So a few up the stairs, and then eventually you'd end up in this place, which is the kitchen of the old office. It looks quite tidy here. That's not the impression we got the first times we visited. There were usually empty coffee cups everywhere. People were sometimes sitting around this table taking a computer apart or something like that. And there was always, it was difficult to imagine that the people who worked in this place created a game that was played by so many people all across the world. There was a very friendly atmosphere in the flat. I remember one interview we did when we were talking with Markus about some pretty personal stuff from his childhood, and then suddenly we're interrupted by Jens, who comes in with one of these Nerf guns, that shoot and he shoots one of these foam bullets in Markus's head. So what had been a fairly serious interview sort of degenerated into a game where two people were chasing each other around with Nerf guns. So that was kind of the atmosphere in this place. At the back there was a gaming room with some consoles in it, which was eventually cleared out to make room for more desks. And there was also, and this is quite interesting, there was also a different room. There was a meeting room in here, which was very different. It was a lot cleaner, a lot more business-like. You had white chairs and a big white table. And it's struck us as the place where all the serious business took place. So whenever there was an important visitor coming in, this is, you know, they wouldn't necessarily see all this. They would be taking into the important meeting room to talk about important stuff. A lot of people don't know this, especially if you're not from Stockholm, but Stockholm, and especially the area around where the first Mojang office was, is actually really important in terms of games development. It's a really important place, even worldwide. So this is a map of the south of Stockholm, right? And the blue thing you see there is the old Mojang office. And these are a few more, just to give you an idea. This is all within a few hundred meters, I would say, less than a mile across. So if you look at the one to the top, the blue thing at the top there, that's where a studio called DICE has their headquarters. Does anyone know DICE? Do you know what games they make? Battlefield series? Yeah, so they make all the Battlefield series. So at the top there, that's where all of the Battlefield 3 was produced there. Battlefield 4, which I think is released this week, was produced there as well. Right next to it, there's another one. Has anyone heard of a company called Skype? Yeah. So Skype is a Swedish invention, right? And this is where the Skype offices was until very recently.
I think we have a question here.
Yeah, go for it.
Go ahead.
Is the book basically biography?
Sort of, yeah. It's not a biography usually implies that it's ordered by the person it's about, if that makes sense. And this is not, it's not the case that Notch asked us to write a book about him. It's more like we came from the outside and wrote a book about Minecraft. So sort of, but not, it's broader, I would say. It's more about the game as a whole.
Yeah. Some people have called it a documentary book, which pretty much makes sense.
Yeah. Okay, so the one in the center here, I realize you can't see what I'm pointing at, but the blue thing in the center of the screen, that's where a studio called Avalanche is based. Is anyone aware of Avalanche? Can you see that? Yeah. Avalanche makes games like Just Cause 2, which is a pretty big deal. A lot of YouTubers play around with that. A studio called Paradox has their offices in the same building. Paradox made a game called Magica that I really like. And they also make a lot of strategy games that are quite popular with people. Has anyone ever used the Pirate Bay? Do you know what the Pirate Bay is? Of course you have, but is everyone aware of what the Pirate Bay is? It's the world's largest file sharing site. They used to have their servers right here. Is anyone familiar with WikiLeaks? Yeah, so the WikiLeaks servers used to be hosted right here. So this is all within a few hundred meters, right? So games, I mean, games worth insane amounts of money and played by millions and millions of people are all developed within this neighborhood, which is quite fascinating, I think. So the flat that Mojang was in might have been quite run down, but it was right in the middle of where you want to be as a game developer in Sweden. Yes, go ahead.
So that's interesting, but how did that come to be? Why is there such a concept?
Right. We go into that in the book, and I find that really interesting as well. Wasn't sure if you guys would, but I'm glad you asked. That gives me an opportunity to talk about it. There are several reasons for that. Sweden has always been very sort of computer literate. People are used to, people use computers in school. There's been a lot of government initiatives to get people to use more computers. There's a really interesting thing a few years back where you would basically how would I
subsidize? The government would subsidize computers for regular people.
Yeah.
So you get a tax deduction for getting a computer from your employer, and that put computers in a lot of people's homes, and probably made a big difference.
Yeah. If anyone remembers the IT bubble from 10, 15 years ago, a lot of the most talked about companies at that time were based in Sweden, and obviously when they went bust, that meant a lot of programmers lost their jobs. So there was a lot of creativity happening there. We have a strong engineering tradition with companies like Ericsson, for example. And I'm not sure if anyone remembers the old demo scene, for example, creating computer demos like computer art. It's also a very Scandinavian phenomenon. So there are many reasons for that. I think today programmer is one of the most common jobs in Stockholm, right?
Yeah, it is.
If you look at the statistics about what people do for a living in Stockholm. Computer programmer is one of the, in terms of numbers of people, one of the most common jobs in the city. So.
That doesn't go for the whole of Sweden, but for Stockholm, it's like that. So back to the book then. What we tried to do in this book is really to understand Minecraft, and to do that, as I said, we thought we had to understand Notch, Markus, as well. It's important to remember that Minecraft was far from the first game he ever created, even though you probably haven't heard of many that he created before. Because before starting working with Minecraft, he worked at a company called King. Their offices are actually not within this area. Do you know about the game developer King? Do you know about Candy Crush Saga? Yeah, that's the company where he used to work before starting Minecraft. So Markus worked there for quite a while, but there was one thing he didn't like there. His employers at King were more concerned with counting revenue and how much money they make from their games, rather than actually producing games they would really love themselves, and that maybe that the gamers would love as well, and something that they could be proud of. Markus even presented a few ideas of his own, only to have them dismissed because they were not seen as potentially profitable enough during his time at King. So eventually he got so fed up with that kind of atmosphere that he left. He started to work as a programmer, not games programming, but just regular programming at another company, and instead started making games in his spare time. At that point, he sort of realized that if he were to make the games he had dreamt about, like the games he could really be proud of, he would have to do it in his own time and then spend his days working a dull computer programming job. And it was at that point, in his own flat, in the evenings, that he started to work on what turned into Minecraft. And I think that really says something interesting about creativity and the kind of atmosphere and environment that is needed for creative things to happen. We actually make a point about, we asked his former bosses this question: if he had presented an idea like Minecraft when he was working there, if he sketched it up on a paper or just presented like the basic idea of Minecraft, we asked, would you have approved of it? Would you have given him the time to work on this? Would you have invested in this? And everyone has to admit that no, probably they wouldn't have done that. It was too weird an idea, too strange a game for them to believe in. So at one point, Markus was the only one in the world really believing in the idea of Minecraft. Today it's hard to grasp, but that was really the case back then. So much that he couldn't even work in the games industry for a while there.
Yeah. We have some questions.
Oh,
Sorry,
yeah.
Go ahead in the green. Sorry, the green shirt back there was first. Sorry.
So he did work on his firm online.
Yes.
Yes.
True.
Oh, that's true. We covered that in the book. We just didn't.
Just wonder at what time does it take place in?
So you mean in what time did Worm Online happen?
Yeah.
So Markus and Rolf worked on that together before Minecraft was started, and then I think, and this is really a question for him because I'm not really up to speed on that, but I think there is still some ownership in the company that does Worm. I think that Markus still has some part to play in it, but I'm not entirely sure about that. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
So there's all sorts of crazy programmers building games at home. Some are getting sponsored by their bosses, some are not.
Yeah.
Was there I haven't read your book, is there a big turning point where he says, I've done something great here?
Well, that's it.
Or was it a slow sort of, I mean, the beginning's always slow.
Yeah. Well, there's a clear, to us at least, and this is of course our interpretation, but to us, when Markus leaves his job and decides I'm gonna work on my own game instead, which then eventually grows into Minecraft, is a really important turning point. And I think that's something that many entrepreneurs or people who run their own companies could sort of see themselves in. That you make this decision. If I want to make a reality of my ideas, I have to do it on my own. I can't rely on someone else pay me to do that.
So that was his decision to leave?
Yeah.
Was there already market confirmation, or did that come later?
Well,
Did he say, okay, I made the right decision at the time, or did he decide?
It took a while. It took a while to realize that this would be a huge deal. But his goals were very modest in the beginning. Like he set up a goal, I can't remember exactly, but he sold maybe 20 copies a day. He would make a decent living from Minecraft. So that was what he was aiming for at that point. He obviously had no idea what it was gonna turn into. So there was probably several steps where he realized that he made the right decision.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry.
Did he welcome the idea of making the book, or was it more of a he wanted to keep it private for a while until it got a little more popular?
I think, well, the idea was ours, and he never said, don't do this. And he gladly helped us out with the interviews that we wanted to do. But again, it's like, it's also a story about the phenomenon rather than just the person. So it's important for us. I mean, our reasoning is that in order to understand Minecraft, we have to understand Markus, because it doesn't make sense otherwise. So, yeah, I hope that sort of answers your question.
Following up on that, there's some really deeply personal stuff about his sister and his father.
Right.
How has he reacted to that being in print?
Not.
Was it negative?
No, not really. I mean, for us as journalists, it's also important to be independent, if that makes sense. I mean, it's important for us and for, our self-respect, and also the way, it's kind of this contract between the reader and the writer that this is something that we've written. It's not something that's been ordered by someone else. And I think Markus has a similar way of looking at this. He sees this as our project. And if he gets involved, that kind of makes it his project. And if he wants to tell his story, I think he would rather do it himself, if that makes sense. So, no, it's been welcomed, but it's also important for us that this is our book, and yeah, sort of. Is that sort of an answer?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Right. So there was a similar happening, which I think is interesting as well. When Jakob, who's just down here, who I think you all recognize as well, who's the man currently working on Scrolls, and Markus started the company Mojang, when they were just about to start Mojang. Minecraft was taking off and was selling quite well. There was a call from the company Valve. Does anyone know Valve? Does everyone know Valve? Valve, of course, makes Half-Life, Portal. Hugely influential company and very well-respected company. Asking Markus to come for a visit, to visit their headquarters, which is just outside of Seattle. And I mean, if I would get a call from Valve asking me to come visit, I would say yes, and I think most people would. So Markus, of course, did say yes. And eventually, when he was there after a few meetings, there was actually a job offer placed on the table. So Valve tried to hire Markus before Mojang and Minecraft grew into the massive success it is today. And this was also an interesting turning point, we think. We talked to Markus quite a lot about this. And to us, he described it as one of the hardest decisions of his life, but he turned them down, of course, because otherwise we wouldn't have what we have today. And I think that's worth thinking about. I mean, working for Valve would be a dream come true for pretty much any games programmer in the world, I think. And deciding that, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to try to make my own idea a reality. I'm going to try to make my own dream come true. It's a really strong thing to do, but it's probably a really difficult thing to do as well. But again, it says something about in what environments and in what atmospheres does creativity work, and where can new ideas be given the room they need to really grow and become something big, something more than just an idea. I suppose how sort of daring to go your own way is sometimes very necessary in order if you want to make a reality of your ideas.
Yeah. So if there is like a general theme throughout the book, it's like the idea of being independent from King at one point, being independent even from Valve, a very respected games company as well. So those two those two decisions really, I think, really defines that kind of mentality that was needed really for Minecraft to turn into what it is today. So.
Right. So the books. Yes. Sorry. Go on.
So that's great. And that's actually interesting. Does he have like a hero in the industry, or someone he looks up to, or he's kind of model? Just I want to make games like so and so.
Well, there's
That's
a
a
lot.
good question,
We do try to get to the bottom of the inspirations behind Minecraft quite a lot, and there are a few games that are often mentioned that Markus brought up several times that I think that I myself can understand the inspiration. One of them is called Dwarf Fortress. Has anyone ever played Dwarf Fortress? Okay, so Dwarf Fortress is a graphically fairly simple but mechanically very, very complex game where you control a group of dwarves and you're basically building a fortress. And it's worth checking out. It's a really interesting game, and you can clearly see that's where the ideas of freedom of player choice comes from, that you're given a world and you can pretty much do whatever you want with that world. Another inspiration is Roller Coaster Tycoon, and I think that's just because Markus liked going on roller coasters that he built himself. And the third one is a game called Dungeon Keeper. Dungeon Keeper is a classic game by Bullfrog, Peter Molyneux, which is a very famous game maker today, where it switches the perspectives of the classic Dungeons and Dragons tale. So you're not playing the hero going into the dungeon, but you're playing the dungeon master who tries to stop the heroes. And those three games that are made, Dwarf Fortress is made by a guy called Tarn Adams, and Dungeon Keeper is made by Peter Molyneux, which is, again, a really well-respected gaming industry. I can clearly see there are sort of clear red threads from those going into Minecraft.
So it's kind of like the mind of the architect, isn't it?
Yeah, the mind of the what?
The architect of the game instead of the mind of the player.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
There's a question there.
Curious, in the story of Minecraft becoming successful, would you say it was perseverance, or the inspiration of the ideas, or some circumstance and serendipity, or?
Well, there's a lot of just circumstance, I would say. There's something that's better to be completely honest about. But there's a clear and very strong belief in the idea from the beginning in Markus, which I find very interesting. As Linus said, there was at one point clearly the case that nobody except for himself thought that this was a good idea.
Yeah.
And it obviously was. We're here.
But in terms of reaching a larger audience, it was extremely important as well, the kind of support the game got from YouTubers and people writing about it, like the community that grew so quickly. We had a look at the very early, the very first forum post where Minecraft, the very first version of Minecraft was posted, and only a few minutes after that post, the first images showed up where people wanted to show off what they had made in Minecraft. And comparing to what's done today, it's extremely primitive. But still, the idea of building something, then wanting to show it to others, thereby also helping the game grow and reach a larger audience, it's almost like a prophecy when you look back at it, that it happened instantly.
Did he realize it was going to have that natural social aspect? That's totally something that surprised him.
It did surprise him a bit, yeah. He really appreciated it from early on, but he told us at some point, I think, that a lot of that happened without him even knowing that it was happening.
You had a question here as well.
Yeah, I'm just gonna correct you on one thing.
Okay.
Go on.
He wasn't alone thinking that our dad also always believed in him.
Yes.
Yeah, good
Yeah.
point. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
He was the only one who
Yeah.
stood by Markus' side.
All right. Yeah.
Now, obviously, everyone realizes that Anna is quite.
What was her comment?
Do you want to say it again, or should? Okay, so the point was, we said that Markus was alone in believing the idea. That's not really true. Markus's dad was a big supporter of his ideas from the start as well. Yeah, thanks.
The only one in the industry, maybe we should say.
Yeah, the only one in the games industry.
Yeah.
That's probably a better way to put it.
So what's next? You write the book, you talk about the story. Is it repeatable? Is there chapter 2?
Well, I'm really interested in what's happening now. This book ends at just about. Okay, so this book ends in about a year ago, right? when it came out in Swedish. That, I mean, the story that is told in the book ends at about that time. And obviously, I think in many ways what's happening now is possibly even more interesting. As any artist or you know, musician or whatever who has had one big hit would know, the second album is really, really difficult. I mean, how do you follow something like this? And I would assume there is a lot of pressure, and this is after our book, so I don't really know, but I would assume there's a lot of pressure to come up with something else, like what do I do now? And we've sort of seen that with some of the projects that Mojang has started, like the space game 10 to the Sea, for example, that eventually didn't really become anything. And that's an interesting situation that I think would be possibly interesting to cover in some way.
Or does the game evolve over time?
Yes,
Yeah,
it absolutely does, yes. Yeah, I mean, I think the community that exists today is so fascinating in some
Stay
sense.
together to do the next thing, it doesn't break apart.
Yeah.
Your thoughts are maybe? Yes?
Well, if you would have asked me 2 years ago when we started working on the book, or even when we finished it, I would have probably have said that it had reached its peak, because that would make sense for any other game to be like to reach its peak and then fall into oblivion. But that hasn't happened yet, so I shouldn't say that it will be over anytime soon. It could probably keep growing for a very long time still. Did we have another question here? Yeah.
Were you researching the book during the MINECON in Las Vegas, or was that when you proposed the idea?
Yeah, no, we had gotten started at that time, but that's really our first.
Was that the first major gathering?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't play the game, both of my kids do, and I was amazed at the
Yeah.
passion and
Yeah.
intensity of this community.
Well,
It's insane.
Was Mojang similarly surprised, or were they somewhat expectant?
I mean, I think they had, both they and we had seen the numbers. I mean, we knew how many copies it had sold. We knew how many people playing, how many people were playing it at that point. But really seeing all these people, that was 5,000. This is 7,500. But even 5,000 people in the same room with this kind of passion for the game, that was, I mean, at least for me, and I would assume for them as well, a bit of a shock in the positive sense.
For us, that was a big realization
Yeah.
that there is something happening here. There's a lot. I think you used the word passion. There's a passion around this thing that is. You can't just explain that by in the normal way. You have to look. You have to understand what builds a community like this. So for us, it was a real eye opener.
Yeah, I would imagine it's what
Yeah.
makes it sustainable for
Yeah.
years to come.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think so. Just in the back.
I'm curious about that, given the sort of cultural phenomenon, given what you know about the gaming industry. What is it about Minecraft that
Mm.
has taken off?
Yeah.
What's unique about it?
Well, there's a few things. Sorry, do you want to?
No, go ahead.
There's a few things that we point to. One is obviously the extremely open nature of the game. I mean, some people would argue that Minecraft isn't a game. I know we spoke to a few investors and like people from Silicon Valley who make a living investing in tech companies to hear their thoughts on that. And I remember one argument was that Minecraft is sort of the link between a regular video game and a social network like Facebook. So there are a lot of aspects in Minecraft that have more in common with Facebook than with other games. And if you ask Minecrafters, everyone always comes back to the social aspects of it, the community feeling, and the YouTube obviously played a huge part in making the game grow so much. And the way Minecraft tied into the Let's Play craze at a fairly early stage is, from a marketing perspective, just pure genius. I mean, if you build something really impressive and you upload it to Facebook, to YouTube, that becomes advertising for the game. That makes more people take notice and more people, I mean, it's kind of a self-perpetuating machine in the end. But also I think the fact that the people at Mojang, especially in the beginning, were very, very, or made sure to stay very close to the community. Markus has always been very active on Twitter. Jeb is very active today on Twitter. So there's this, I mean, obviously you can't have a personal relationship with 40 million players. That's impossible. But you can at least give the impression of being available. I mean, anyone can talk to someone working at Mojang, and you might even get a reply. So there's this kind of constant exchange of ideas, which I think was very, very important. And there's also, there's also something that's changing in the gaming industry right now is that game makers are being held up as I don't know, auteurs in a way that hasn't really been the case in the past. So in some sense, I think the gaming world was a lot of people were waiting for someone like Markus, who is a person who symbolizes a game very clearly, rather than just an anonymous company, to sort of emerge and take that part. And he was simply the right person at the right time.
And for that to happen, it was important that it was him who created the game and was the only, initially the only one developing it. Then it turned into like the creation of one person rather than the creation of a crowd of hundreds of people who had been working on as it is with other games.
Yeah, you can compare it to Battlefield, which is a game series that we brought up. More people play Battlefield than play Minecraft. So purely looking at numbers, Battlefield is, there are many games that are sold in larger numbers, but I would think that most Battlefield players have very little idea of who actually makes the game. They know about DICE, the company, but you can't point to a specific individual. Whereas with Minecraft, that's not the case. That's an important change going on. Yeah.
How hard was it for Notch to kind of hand that off to Jeff and let him take the reins?
I think he was happy to do it, apparently. He was, because he had, in Jeb he found someone who shared his ideas of how games should be developed. I don't think he would have been comfortable handing enough to anyone, but they sort of found each other and realized they had a very similar ideas of where Minecraft should be going and how games should evolve. So it was the chemistry between them were very important, I think.
Yeah. Go on.
Was it ever anticipated that anything on the modding community would form that would cause the game to become a living document?
Very good question. And actually, there was a lot of debate about whether or not modding was a good thing within Mojang. I mean, not many people were convinced that that was the direction that Minecraft should go. There was a lot of arguing back and forth, and I know some people would rather have seen it stay more controlled and less open, if that makes sense. And obviously, the modding community has played a huge part in making Minecraft what it is today. And again, it sort of ties into this idea of the open nature and how making something so open that it, in a sense, is created by the players rather than by the developers is a very powerful tool if you can get it going. Yeah. I think that's pretty much it. I'm not sure if I finished up with my last sentence there. So many good questions.
We have like 2 minutes if you have one more question.
Yeah.
Before we.
For sale here?
Yes. We are located. We have a table behind the Lego booth.
Sort of in between ThinkGeek and Jinx.
Yeah.
And these are, at least officially, I know Amazon has started selling them, but they were supposed to be the first copies in existence, the ones we offer this year. And of course, we're happy to sign them if you're interested.
Yes. Yeah.
Cool. So thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. Thanks.
Thanks.